Time is now 3:31, and I would like to open the meeting, February 2nd, 2022, City of Norwood Planning Commission. As there are no public hearings, may I have a motion to open the regular meeting?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second that.
Mrs. Town, please call the roll.
Mayor Schneider,
Present.
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from December 1st, 2021 and January 5th, 2022.
Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Mrs. Town, please call the roll.
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mayor Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right. Under old business, we have a continuance of a zoning ordinance amendment discussion. I believe Mike Skelly has prepared a summary of suggested zoning ordinance amendments based on his earlier memorandum. This one provides the top 12 zoning ordinance amendments with priority and weighting. Mike, would you walk us through that briefly?
Sure. Good afternoon, members. So at the last meeting, commission members.
Mike, would you please use your microphone?
Sure.
Thank you.
Mike, use the mic.
So at the last meeting, the direction from commission members was to take the, 28, 30 items that were presented and organize it in such a way just to provide for similar like possible amendments, and then also to organize it in a way that what was considered a priority, low-lying fruit. So based on those directions, at least the variables, I did two things. I prepared a 3-page chart which bundles some of the prior 9-page items that you saw. And then I also prepared a colored 1-page sheet, which was essentially putting maybe 6 criteria together in terms of whether it's budget, need, how does it mesh with our city's goals and objectives, and then do some sort of ranking scoring with regards to that. So essentially, if you see it as green, it got a high score. If it got yellow, it's kind of in the middle, and then if it was red, it's kind of a low priority, or at least not as urgent. Now these are all based on my gleaning of interpretation. Obviously, the commission members might have different weighting and ranking of what's essential and what's not. So I guess that's the purpose of this meeting. But my hope is that at least these 2 deliverables helps provide you with greater clarity, or at least some options as to which of these you want to pursue first, and more importantly, how would you like to go about dealing with this in terms of the process, both in terms of this committee and then moving it on to council. So in addition to that, subsequent to the meeting, I received a call and email from both a resident who also heads up an environmental stakeholder group, and she provided some additional information, and I told her I'd bring it to the planning commission meeting as to looking, maybe adding a 5th goal, which would deal with kind of related environmental or those type of recommendations. So I have not kind of taken her information and digested it into kind of a simple, here's the top things that she is recommending. But definitely we did receive, like I said, from both a resident and environmental stakeholder person, suggestions as to what the city could look at in terms of environmental policies that could be added to the zoning ordinance. So I'm happy to kind of look at that, and for the next meeting, bring that forward. But I believe, circling back to at least my to-do list, it was essentially to give you guys some thing to look at and kind of ruminate as to how do we proceed forward to make this a manageable project. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike.
So now's a Q&A time?
Yes.
How hard was it? I mean, you assigned the numbers. So you've said that, Mike, that it really is your opinion. How hard was that as you went through this? Because I looked at your top matrix there.
Yeah, and I would say almost ignore this. This was just trying to set it up. So,
Correct.
score of 1, 2, 3. But here's the key thing in terms of if it's low cost, it's not going to cost us a lot of money. We don't have to hire some consultants. That was given a decent score in terms of budget. And as you work yourself down in terms of how does it mesh and all the other ones. So, but again, it wasn't that hard. It was just you put your own personal opinion, your own personal biases together. And again, from my experience, having done these, what's going to take more time or less time, and what's considered a more time-intensive fix.
Okay, because I did not take each one of those blocks and try to identify that I agree or disagree with you. That was kind of my question. Because if you say it's relatively easy to do that, we're going to probably agree with most of those.
Yeah.
That's what I was getting at.
Okay.
The low priorities, I mean, realistically, you've got quite a few 11s in there along that bottom line.
Yeah.
So is that your summary statement, that you would put those on a back burner and put those above 11 on a fast track?
Well, correct, and that's, you see, it's kind of I would say both.
If I'm jumping ahead, tell me.
No, and it's fair, like, and again, it's difficult for me, and it's, in some cases, it's uncomfortable, because, and I'll take the example of the one on the far right, planned unit development changes. So we have an entire section, it's like maybe a dozen pages, and we don't deal with PUDs on a regular basis, like staff is not answering questions, but when it is used, it's very impactful. So the last major one was obviously the Factory 52. I believe in the 9-page document, and I kind of was politely and trying to diplomatically say, hey, there's probably other pending PUDs that we might see in the next 6 months or 12 months. That could be a priority, because in a sense, if a developer says, hey, I'm going to be using the PD process, and if we are of the common belief that that section should be tweaked to provide better protection to the city, then that jumps to the head of the line. It's just a matter as to what collectively
Okay.
do we.
Let's stay on the
Yeah.
PUDs, because that's the one that you had mentioned last time you believed would be one of the hardest, if I remember correctly.
Correct.
But you gave it a 1 for cost and budget, which I thought, the way at least I was reading this, that very low cost. Is that right? By giving it a 1?
Correct, unless we would drag in some consultants to say, hey, we need
Got
some.
it?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you gave it a 1 for difficulty to implement. Is that because, Mike, you have enough in-house knowledge on PUDs? Again, this is not a deposition. I'm just trying to make sure you've spent a lot of time on this. It's a very good document.
Senator Sewer, it sure seems like a deposition.
A deposition.
No, I'm just kidding.
I'm taking the fifth.
Putting a ranking really helps, I think, everybody understand where your headset is after the original 27.
Correct, and it's also my difficulty, and I don't know, sometimes for you guys, I don't want to lead. I would prefer to answer questions yes or no, as opposed to leading, and in a sense, people could accuse me of you're trying to bias or influence peddling
Okay.
the commission. So that's where I'm keeping it somewhat open. Ultimately, what you guys, but here's how you could look at it in terms of some sort of ranking, scoring for it. So at least that's why I followed it on the bottom with a quick fix, and that's kind of a quick yes or no. What do I see? Could we tackle it, and is it a big deal? So you could almost put your hand over those colored banding and just say, bottom line, Skelly, what is it? And that's where the quick fix.
So you have it down as an 11,
Yes.
with a comment of a no as a quick fix.
Yeah, so the 11 means it's kind of in the middle, and the no means this is going to take the planning commission probably, could be 2, could be 3, could be 4 meetings to discuss, debate, and then clean up that existing section, 1155 in the ordinance.
More than a discussion.
Oh, yeah, like I think the PUD is going to be a lot of the discussions, because essentially that section, PUDs is set up, it's like a give and take. We're demanding of the developer to provide for additional landscaping, green space, better quality buildings, and in return, we give them increases in densities, et cetera. So,
I think, like I said, after I did have to look at this for a while to really understand where you were heading with this, so I think I appreciate you taking the legwork of taking 27 down to 12. It's just interesting as you put it into this, like row houses. Hell, I don't know. I don't have an opinion on a row house. I'd have to go to somebody that's got more experience on what row houses, the complexities are. So it sounds like either they're coming up that there's some, and our zoning code is a little light on that.
yeah, I think our ordinance is light on it right now, and I think moving forward with future developments, it's something that could be a benefit for developers, saying, hey, it's one more
Okay.
residential product we can offer.
Well, I'm going to stop talking and let somebody else.
Well, I'd throw 2 points in here. One is that, Mike Skelly, you are an employee of the city of Norwood. You're not a contractor in this. We do expect you to provide us with this type of information. We do expect you to help us understand it more and give us guidance and sort of guide where we are going. So, when you say that, I think, well, we're paying you, the citizens of Norwood are paying you. This is your job, and that's what I do expect out of you. Help us understand more because you have more knowledge of it. You're not a contractor, and so when you say that, I say, Mike, that's exactly what we want you doing. That's my one point. My second point would be looking at this and understanding the conversation that you and Mr. Sewer were having is, I look at this and say, we need to take a couple of these. We've got 3 of these that are 15s, that are green, that are quick, low-lying fruit fixes, things that we can do. And I would like to get some victories under our belt as the Planning Commission to say, we're moving in the right direction. Let's make these things. So let's concentrate on the 3, or there's actually 4 of them, 4 of them that are important to get some wins under our belt, and then we keep chewing away at this. Bernie, I think one that you brought up last time was the BZA approvals and fences, and it's constantly fences in front of BZA, and we're taking up a lot of our time with BZA with fences. Well, that's one that's listed as a 15 and as a yes when it comes to, I hate to use the word quick fix, but it is a fix that can be achieved, and then we eliminate that problem. So I'd like for us to concentrate on these 4 that we can potentially move forward with, and then readdress. Then you look at this, then you have to go and do your chart all over again. Once we get these 4 established and moving in the right direction, we grab the other ones, and now you've got to reset it to work right. That's sort of my thought process on this.
Based on what Noah had requested at last meeting, when the meeting minutes, is if we would knock those 4 off, which I do believe a very straightforward workshop, we roll our sleeves up, we can take care of them. What I thought you said last time is let's not bludgeon the council with 4. Let's do all of them, so we would hold until we get all 12 done. This is a question.
Yeah, I think there are different ways we can do it. The concern I was trying to address there was that we don't pepper council with 15 ordinances.
Okay.
So I think there are lots of different reasonable ways we can say, let's
So you're
take
saying
5,
that
let's
3
take
groups
7.
of 4 would not be overburdening the
Right.
law, whatever has to draft the ordinances?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I don't want to put council in a position where every meeting, they've got something new from the planning commission on there. So just how can we kind of bundle these things together so that we get them through expeditiously enough, but that we're not tying up their agenda with considering all of these things at every meeting. But,
Okay, I just want to make sure, because last time it was a pretty strong opinion that we lumped these into one group, and my vision was it was going to take us months to get through that. But if we're going to say, let's get like the 4 easy ones, maybe one meeting.
It doesn't work in one meeting for council either. If this is 4 separate bills that are going for ordinances, this is 3 readings, this is 3 meetings, this is 6 weeks for them to approve it and get it done. So, if we're doing it that way, because that's how they want to do it. I mean, if we can get these four, I look at it and say if over 6 months' time, we could get 2 lumps of 4 done, we're doing pretty darn good.
Let's do it, yeah.
We're productive.
I agree.
So,
Well, I think with that, why don't we try to pick apart a couple of these easy ones and see if we can get them off our agenda here. I'd like to take a look at the single consolidated land use chart. When I take a look at moving from multiple charts down to a single chart, that one is one that just makes a ton of sense to me. That gives people a single source where they have to go and look for these issues. I think that can pare that down quite a bit. Mike, will you talk real briefly about what that chart would look like? I believe you provided that at the last meeting, is that correct? Or a mock-up
I
of
may
that?
have, but essentially what you're doing, so for example, we have 4 residential zones, we have like another 4 or 5 or so commercial, 2 industrial, and when you go through each of those sections, there's, the best way to physically show you. So here's a good example. So under chapter 1143, which is for general business district, you have the opening, information on the verbiage, et cetera. But the guts of the zoning ordinance is when you go to the second page, and there's 1 page, 2 page, almost 3 full pages of detailed uses. And that's replicated in all of the zones. And for example, when you would have this particular zone, the general business district versus, let's say, the central business district for the downtown area which we're sitting in, you're almost replicating each one. And to me...
In many cases it does. It says everything that was in,
Correct, sometimes it does
previous-
that, yeah. So in this day and age, when people talk about do-it-yourself or make it convenient, if it's going to be an engineering consultant or whoever who does plans, that person's going to, click, read the zoning ordinance, read it. But for the average person, whoever just wants a quick visual, once it's on a 1 page, and assume we can all agree on appropriate font, they would go to our website, look at the range, and they would have one document that shows it all. So that's the intention. Again, I've seen it in other municipalities just to reduce on the amount of.
that's the chart we're
That's
talking
the chart,
about, right?
correct.
Where
So
it has
that's
the X's and the CUs and the Ps,
Yeah,
permit required, not required, that, okay.
correct. So when I came here, I kind of did that just because quickly to go through it. And again, it helps me look for patterns. Okay, what's the difference between one zone versus the other?
And for those who aren't, because we deal with this all the time, it's just the way whoever built our zoning code, it is repeated, like R2 repeats what was in R1. That kind of thing. And I think what you're saying is, let's not put it in words, let's just put an X for all those things that were repeated as being acceptable. And I think it is much easier than having to read all the sections. So I get this one. I don't know what a negative would even be, except if you screw something up and you make a mistake of putting an X somewhere that it shouldn't have an X.
Yeah, I think hopefully there'll be other eyes aside from this body, myself, the law department, that if there is sometimes an error, they'll be caught. But my hope is that, it'll be definitely accurate. And again, the big thing is convenience.
Oh, I get it, yeah.
You have that, as Bernie, where did you pick that up?
That was last week. That was last month, was in the packet.
Yeah, that's right.
It was
But it's-
attached to his 1216 memo, interoffice memo.
But it's nowhere in use within the building department. It's nowhere in use within the city at this time. This is a new consolidated land use chart.
Correct. So like I said, right now we have separate, each zone has its own chart, but we don't have a master chart.
I mean, the decision could be do nothing and just leave it the way it is, because I don't think it's causing a problem.
No, because
This is an efficiency issue.
you know, we have Carrie here, but I don't think people are calling in and saying, this is stupid. It's just, you know what I mean? So it's just something I saw other municipalities do, we worked on. It's like, why not
Well,
do it this way?
you guys are, I think you're simplifying something and making it sound like it's not. We are pushed constantly with the administration to streamline the process for developers to look at what they can and cannot do. This is streamlining that process. This is providing them with the thing. Here's what you have. Take a look at it, and this. So it does streamline the process. It's absolutely what the city needs to do, and it's not. It does simplify things. Well, okay, shouldn't we be doing that? So I think it's an absolute plus. Now, how do we move forward with it? We're saying that council needs to adopt it into our zoning?
Correct. So I would write something up, and there's a number of ways of doing it, so now this chart becomes the replacement or, you know, refer, because we do something similar already right now in section 1151, which there's a table for lot area for setbacks. Essentially, it's found on page 100, and essentially it looks like this. So that thought process of consolidating everything onto one has already been deemed an appropriate idea when it comes to setbacks, lot area, height, etc. So you're just extending that same logic to permitted uses, conditional uses, not permitted.
Yeah, I think this is an excellent idea. I would request that we have Mike draft an ordinance to bring for us at the next planning commission that we can endorse and send to council at that time.
Yeah, and again, not to put Carrie on the spot, but again, here you have someone that's hourly, if not more, dealing with that stuff for customers, et cetera, if that would be worthwhile to have.
Are you asking me?
I'm asking you, at least, if that's out of turn, but.
I understand the process, and that's where they were trying to move when they changed the zoning from the refer back to, R3 referred to R2, referred to R1. They were trying to create a chart system that when you were in R3, everything was there. You didn't have to go back. And they did that all the way through, all the way up to the manufacturing districts. They did not incorporate those. So to have one chart someplace that says, if you're in general business district, and you can go down, would be helpful for people as long as, I think it would be helpful for people.
Okay.
It's the next logical step in
We
the
don't-
revisions.
We don't need a motion. I mean, ultimately, all we need to do is all concur that, that's the process we want to go down, and then at the next planning commission meeting, we'll have that information. Right?
I believe that's correct.
Okay. Do we want to keep working across? Do we want to talk about the staff delegate versus the building commissioners slash CBO? We'll have a discussion on that.
Yeah, I would like to do that. I think that's a logical next one to look at. And I think that's another one that is a good move that will help us get things sped up, give people answers a little bit quicker. When I look at it, if the chief building official has staff that he's confident in that can answer these questions, I don't see a reason that he should be prohibited from delegating the ability to answer those questions to that staff.
So this is something where I think, at least in fairness to the building department, it probably is worth having a discussion. I could go ahead and draft it, but this is the way I'm understanding it. It's not all the kinks are ironed out. So in the building department, the chief building official or the building commissioner is Dan Bly. So we have, in addition, 4 other people, 2 property maintenance officials, a building inspector, and obviously Carrie. And I think depending on each person's comfort level, their understanding, et cetera, I look at it, you have 4 people. And assuming people are willing, they can be trained, they can be, courses you can take, as opposed to saying, well, hey, that determination has to go to Dan Bly. How I typically would view that, if someone's calling just for a quick yes or no, and they're not asking for something in writing, and I'll get to that in a second, there's potentially 4 people that could probably at least address that question. Now, if they want something in writing, the mechanism is a zoning permit. And that's something where I say, well, fine, I need this in writing, fine, okay, the zoning permit is your written verification. So when I went through the zoning ordinance, I saw that, and sometimes it was different terms, it was either the CBO, it was the building commissioner, and again, even in the document, you have director, and now I just did a quick before the meeting, there's 13 hits. Believe it or not, like actually your probably name comes up more often, then it's the law director, and then the planning director, and then the community development director are also there, so depending on what's situated. So that's something where more generally, and a lot more discussion, but I can drill down and talk to staff and, talk to Dan Bly and talk to you if necessary. Is there a way to clean up that if there's a decision that can be made by Dan saying, hey, fine, whatever, I'm delegating to staff, to person X, person Y to make an initial determination, and then if something needs to be clarified in writing, yeah, we'll have a zoning permit, and then someone could also sign that or a delegate. But that was just something in past jobs, I had my staff, if they were comfortable making a determination, go for it. And if you need some additional clarification, talk to me. If you need legal clarification, talk to Keith Moore. If you need engineering clarification, we have an in-house engineer. So it's one of these things I think if staff is comfortable to do that, again, provide that opportunity where they can make a decision, and the hope is that, it could be decided a lot quicker sometimes.
So with the proper qualifications, you untie their hands and let them facilitate and make things happen quickly too.
Correct, yeah. And again, the proviso, if they're uncomfortable or not sure, again, my staff used to come and say, hey, what, and we toss it around. And again, not to belittle sometimes issues for fences, it's like, okay, well, what's the impact then? Because sometimes if it's in the gray area, zoning-wise or legal-wise, if we're unsure, okay, what's going to be the impact or what's going to be the potential blow-up? So case by case, we would make that determination, but it's something, it could be a lot more laborious if it's only one person in charge for that versus, that person with his or her staff, delegates. So that was the thought process. So it was more just trying, if you guys are comfortable with that, and if staff's comfortable with that, could we figure something out?
Excuse my ignorance on this. When you're talking, being able to give a verbal answer on this versus it being in writing where it would go up the chain, what kind of circumstance are we talking about where a verbal would suffice?
It could be something where we get a call from, let's say, a design engineer doing some preliminary work, and they just want a quick, answer to proceed with the next round. It could be someone coming into the town for a retail use or whatever. It could be a resident. And one of the things you see is in terms of, let's say, setbacks for architectural projections. So where they just want a quick thumbs up or thumbs down to proceed before they start spending time for a survey or time for doing a design for the house. So it's, again, people have their own kind of threshold points. And again, it's just giving them this or this, and I think they still have the ability to get something in writing, but if they just want a quick verbal response, is there an opportunity there to do that? So.
And maybe I'm just a little sensitive to this one, because you said the right thing with the right qualifications. I've been around for 25 years on zoning now, and we're not the city of Cincinnati, we're not Hamilton County. There's not a staff of engineers downstairs. And the reality of it is, whoever we have as that chief building officer, and I understand it's used in different ways throughout here, but it really means one person. The good thing about our code is, and again, after 25 years, that's Dan Bly, Jerry Stoker, whoever the contract employee is at the time, it's their job. I've never heard a contractor have problems, and this is because I'm not in the building department every day, say, I haven't been getting an answer, I haven't been able to get an answer. Our contract employees have been pretty good.
Yeah.
So I'm nervous because, we've got a present situation where somebody gave an answer to a citizen that could end up in court. And it's not that they're bad people, they just didn't know the rules.
Yeah.
And I'm very hesitant about relinquishing to people that aren't qualified. You're right on target, Vic. If they're qualified, and I'm not sure who those people are. Experience isn't qualifications. Tenure isn't qualifications. I mean, if we are going to send people, like Mark Reeves has to be certified. So when it comes to questions of inspection, we know that he can stand behind that, right? That's what he's. But I guess I'd be very cautious about now saying we don't need the building officer, which is right now we only have one person who reviews the drawings. But this one to me is fuzzy. Cleaning up the verbiage throughout seems like the low-hanging fruit. But I guess I didn't know this one was a major problem, and I'm all for cleaning up and making things easier. And we've built, the company I used to work for, built 4 buildings in Norwood. We never had trouble with the building inspector, never had trouble with waterworks. We just never did. And I'll tell you what everybody tells me, it's because you follow the rules.
Yeah, and just to clarify, when you said you didn't perceive it as being a problem, and I just want to clarify and emphasize, I don't think it's a problem. I don't know if Carrie thinks it's a problem. I'm just saying, from looking at zoning ordinances all my life, this was something going, can I fix it? And again, I did it for a number of reasons. Hey, the building department's a small staff. Technically, I'm kind of off in the area. So I'm uncomfortable sometimes providing my 2 cents because I might aggravate Carrie or aggravate Dan. So I try to kind of preface or put a caveat when I talk to people saying, ultimately, the way it's situated right now, I'm providing you advice, but legally, in the best way, if you really want it, file a zoning permit, because that's really, then you have something in hand from the appropriate person signing off. So it's more that.
Okay.
That's really, it's not an issue.
That,
it's just,
Mike, I really think the building department does a pretty darn good job of getting guidance, which is really and making sure they don't waste their time. And I know Carrie gives guidance all the time.
Yeah.
But it's also very clear that she says this has to go in front of the zoning board, or this has to go in front of Dan Bly. Again, you said a couple things here. Having different terms throughout our zoning code that means the same thing isn't a good thing. So I agree with that.
Okay.
I think that is a low-hanging fruit item. We should clean that up throughout, so we know it's the same person. But as far as the relinquishing of responsibilities from that individual to staff, and I'm only concerned because when you say the word staff, the staff in that building department is pretty lean.
You're using the wrong term. When you say relinquishing, that's not correct. It's delegating. It is the CBO, the chief building official, saying this person's qualified to answer those questions. I'm fine with that person taking on this role and answering those questions. It's delegating. That person, the CBO, is still the person who's in charge of it, but it's delegating. It's not relinquishing. That's a different process, a different thought.
I guess when I look at this one, to kind of go along with that, what I see this language changing is not so much an empowerment of all the staff to answer any questions that come through. It's empowering that chief building official to say, we've got this staff that I can rely on, that I know has those qualifications that would allow them to answer these questions, and I'm going to now allow them to answer that. So it's allowing that CBO to work more efficiently is the way that I see that.
I'd be fine with that.
Like I said, this was not completely flushed out.
One person is accountable.
It does,
Yeah.
yes.
So you just made it, and I could buy that.
Yeah. Tom, you got anything else to add to that? Jeannie, do you have any thoughts on that?
I like your wordage, Mayor Snyder. You're right. Relinquish versus delegating. I absolutely agree with that. I feel I feel better about the wordage. Continue. I agree with you.
Okay, well, so we'd like to see more on this. We'd like to see at the next planning commission meeting, we'd like to see how that verbiage is written and what the ordinance really would say to give that opportunity for the CBO to do that, to delegate. But I think it's the,
I'm good.
so that it'll be the way that's written is going to be important, and you can share that with Keith Moore and Tim to help them understand our concerns, Bernie's concerns, and all of our concerns on how we do that needs to be pretty well defined.
Sure, and again, my preference is the first thing, I'd like to talk to the building staff saying, hey, what do you guys think about this in terms of the comfort level? Because that's the key thing. If it's like, for instance, like, Carrie's here, it's like if you were given some sort of application for a zoning permit and you call Dan and say, yeah, if you're fine with it, just sign it. Your name, your review, and it's in and out of the department in 48 hours. Is that something you would be comfortable with?
No.
So, and that's the thing, so that's something to determine.
To your point, though, with front yard fences, which is also on there, Mark does do that review and that declined so that it's not going through to Dan. We've already made that delegation. Dan is authorized by the state to delegate to those or the CBO at the time is authorized to delegate certain tasks to certain people, staff that work with them that he feels are comfortable or are knowledgeable in it. And Mark, being the zoning inspector, can definitely look at a front yard fence and write a letter that says the city of Norwood's zoning code doesn't allow that. It's a standard letter that he puts in. So there are some things that are delegated, but maybe not as much as you've seen in other places.
Well, from if I don't mean, were you finished? Sorry.
Yes.
From a perspective of hiring staff, from the mayor's perspective and trying to get good building department people in there, we know that Mark is not going to be doing that job forever, and we are hoping to hire good qualified staff in there that has some different, but we might, and I would think that we potentially will have to hire somebody that is developing up, that is, still in school or is still picking up more classes and doing different things. So this sort of opens the door for, as that individual's capabilities and qualifications improve, then the CBO would be able to delegate more to them to a point that they're broadening their scope and capabilities. That, I think, is an important part because I know, and I think the general public knows, that it is very hard to find engineering people in these building department type positions, the chief building officials for communities. It's a tough job market for those. And most of the chief building officials that are working for communities like Norwood have 6 other communities that they're working for also. So, that's an important aspect as we talk about this and how we can utilize and put the best system in place to help Norwood get the job done.
So as we're kind of bringing this to conclusion, what I heard, Mike, I 100% agree with getting the term consistent throughout our zoning code and not have 4 different terms. That makes sense. And have some type of verbiage that delegates by the CBO to certain individuals that, using that verbiage in the very beginning, therefore, that would actually it'd have to be modified in each of the sections then. I'm fine with both of those. And you'll come back next time on March? Is that right? Or
Yeah.
with sample language?
Yeah.
Excellent.
We are, as the planning commission, we can always have another meeting. We don't have to wait months out. If we wanted to do a special meeting with the commission, if you feel like you're making good progress and you've got items to bring to us, let's talk, and we can bring the commissioners together some other time to try to work through this.
Are you governed by any kind of the, whatever the rule, I'm not a lawyer, but the open, where we have to publicize and? are
Open
you-
meeting laws? Yes, we are.
The planning commission is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would need to give a notice of a special meeting.
Okay.
If we have a hearing, we need to give public notice of that within.
So we can't just have a
24 hours.
conference call?
Yeah,
off the
that's
record.
correct.
No, correct.
No more than 3, or no more than 2
That's right.
of you. 3 of you cannot talk about a topic.
Okay, that answers that.
All right. Next one on here was allow for some home occupancy by right.
So, this item is related, and I'll give you the best thing that fleshes out for an instance. Pretty much a lot of these things would be allowed for as a conditional use. And that would mean the use would have to come to the BZA for approval. And I guess my position or argument that if we can think of various sort of home occupations, and I'll throw out one out there, therapeutic massage therapist. So the person might see maybe 3 clients a day. They have, they're set up in one room in the basement. One of the criteria is that they can't use more than 25% of the square footage. And it's something that, for that particular thing, the average person, it's not going to have a huge draw for parking. We restrict signage. It doesn't really have an associated noise use. Could we write into the zoning ordinance, say that particular one, maybe another half a dozen or so or more, could be allowed for by right? They're permitted, they would just go ahead and do it without the need for a BZA public hearing. So that's the question. I could provide examples, but it's the first almost philosophical thought process. Would you, as the planning commission, believe that's appropriate? And more important, do you think council would probably be on side as well, saying, no, all home occupations need to go to the BZA because they're the kind of final arbitrator, in terms of dealing with that. So, again, my point being, if we can articulate low-intensity, kind of innocuous sort of home occupations, again, another one would be maybe an accountant office. A person seeing people occasionally at home, or they're meeting at a Starbucks. They're not always doing the work. We see a lot of these online businesses where there's no even storage in the unit. It's basically everything's online, and there's probably even no customers or clients coming to the house. Something is done, it's shipped out. Could those type of things be allowed for by right?
So again, because I've been listening to these for 25 years, what's the reason for this one coming up? Because we have A through F that guides Norwood under 115138 that guides BZA on home occupations. It's served us very well. If somebody comes and it doesn't meet those qualifications, we don't approve it. So nobody's spending a lot of time. We're not in lawsuits over it. So I'm trying to figure out what you want to do here.
Correct, and you're right. Yet again, so in my brief 8 months here, I haven't seen it as a burning issue. The only home occupation I believe I was involved in was that gunsmith.
The gunsmith.
So again, it's really,
How about the biggest issue is enforcement?
yeah, that's,
Because I know that there's home occupations going on that we just can't get, for some reason, we can't get them enforced because they're working out of their house, there's traffic, there's in and out, and it's just a problem. I understand that's the problem.
Yeah.
This body doesn't enforce that.
I'm not a proponent of any change to that. I mean, this one, if I had a vote on this, I'd say end discussion. I'm not interested in making any changes to it.
Again, I don't think for somebody who wants a home occupation, they pay $85, which I think is pretty cheap. It gives the public an opportunity to actually, just like the guns. I love the fact that a couple neighbors came. We talked it through, and I think they left okay. So I think that's why if you take it out of BZA, it takes it out of that public hearing and notification. So, again, Vic summarized, see, I have a hard time summarizing very quickly things.
That's why it's nice having these discussions.
Sorry,
because,
Vic.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's an easy fix. So to me, again, I'm not going to fight for it, because I've seen it elsewhere where it's like, no, this is something we don't want to relinquish because it helps having the public there. It protects everyone. It's not big. I'm saying I'm sometimes of a different mindset, saying, hey, can we do it? Yes or no? And if we can, let's work on it. If not, just let's move on. So,
Bernie, if you could give me an idea of how often these are arising at BZA.
I'd say probably maybe 4 times a year.
Okay, so we're not talking a
Carrie,
big
would you-
volume.
4 times a year maybe?
If that,
Yeah. But they're usually like gun cleaning. You know, they're usually something that there's somebody that says, well, how many people are going to be coming here to buy stuff? What kind of sign do you need on the front? Well, I need a sign. How are they going to know where to go? Well, there's no signs allowed, or small sign. So it's those kind of things, and people say, well, wait a minute, that's just not right. Well, yeah, it is. You're in a residential neighborhood. You shouldn't have people coming buying stuff from your home. It's a residence. Now, we are allowing it, but it's got to be controlled. And like I said, the biggest thing, though, is the enforcement. You know, when you get that call that said, do you know they're selling stuff out of the basement? Storing the stuff in the front yard? And it puts a burden on the police department, whoever. You know.
Absolutely.
That's the reason I would get rid of home occupations if you could. But we want to be, I think and we're moving towards, I think, more home occupations, not less. For those that actually want to be honest about it, and they probably do it more for taxes than anything else.
Tom, you got a thought on it? You got any? So you'd vote to end discussion too?
Absolutely.
Okay. The next one is,
After hearing it explained? Yeah.
and it's a good discussion to have, but it's setback lines and architectural projections.
so here's something, and this is more brought up when I first read it, relating to a couple requests, that I either picked up on the phone or definitely attending the last, or one before that in BZA, where it seems that, even one of our BZA board members, Ben,
Eilerman.
thank you, had to deal with that a couple times in instances where a person is putting on an extension or addition to the house, and the way the zoning ordinance is written, it's almost contemplating that if you're going to be building to the build-to line, you should be okay. You still have to go to the BZA to get approval. And the thought process is that, again, similar to home occupation, you want to bring it up to the attention of the immediate neighbors, say, this is what's occurring, and essentially, is there an issue with it? And then the BZA would weigh and evaluate and then approve it or deny it. So the thought process being, if there's a way to further clarify that, and I think when I was at the BZA hearing, there was some confusion as to the degree of flexibility. And again, that's why it would be nice to talk to the applicant from before, including Ben, to find out, is there appropriate verbiage that we can include, as opposed to saying, hey, this has to go to the BZA.
I don't have an opinion on exploring this further, would be fine with me. I haven't, and maybe Bernie or one of you guys have information or Jeannie on it, I don't know.
Right now it comes to BZA. Dan Bly sends it. There are conditions that I wish didn't have to come. We haven't had them recently, but we used to have quite a few front porches that used to come off. And then they used to approach the front yard setback. And to me, if somebody's taking off a front porch that's fallen down and replacing it, the building department should be able to say, we don't need to go to zoning. I mean, that's the kind of thing that, to me, is kind of a no-brainer. Anything that is taken off to repair and make it, up to code and whatever, is an improvement for Norwood. And that should be between the building department and, I believe, the homeowner. It doesn't have to come to BZA. What always happens though is they want to go another 5 feet. You know, it's not putting the porch back exactly. They, you know, it was a little small and I couldn't get my rocker there, so, you know, I wanted to go out towards the street another 5 feet. Well, to me, that's again, is it worth a public hearing? I'm not, shouldn't be the only voice, but I think in some ways, our lot lines are so small that anytime you take, so anyway, I think that's one instance. I think, Mike, were you talking specifically about when we have an offset in a house, for instance, or an addition, that it doesn't have the setback required by code, but it follows the lines of the house?
Yeah.
And this gives you a good example. The zoning board has had kind of an understanding with the building commissioners that if you take the house and it's within 6 feet of the property line, and it's supposed to be 8, but the house was built 50 years ago, as long as they're staying in line with the house, in the back, we're not going to make them set it back another couple feet. That it doesn't make any sense. You want to keep the sight line the same. And we get the building department, that's still typically would come to BZA the way it's set up right now. Could we make some modifications that way that could stay at the building department level? I think yes.
So that's what I'd written down as the existing setback, grandfathered in and approved at the building department level. So if somebody has a front porch and it's not to code per the setbacks now, if they want to tear that porch off and put a new porch on, same size, same place, grandfathered in, same size, they don't have to come, they don't have to
go to zoning, it can go to building
Right.
department.
You don't have to go to zoning, you can, building can look at that and say, you got a 6-foot porch, you're gonna put a 6-foot porch in. But if you want to put an 8-foot porch in now, and you're gonna take that one down, now it does have to go to
Yes,
BZA.
I would say that's how I would,
Same
propose.
same thing for a garage. If a garage is not meeting the setback, but then they want to build that garage on that same line, would that be considered a grandfathered in setback?
So the building department doesn't use the term grandfathered, they use existing conditions. It's an
Okay,
existing
all
condition.
right. Existing, I'll
And
change it
as
here.
far as front porches go, if the porch is existing and they tear it down because it's falling down, as long as they don't encroach any further, we do approve it at the building department level. It is when they go further. Recently, they've had issues with language that we have that talks about, what is that? Projections versus additions to the house. And the additions have gone to Board of Zoning Appeals, where a projection being a deck, if it stayed in line, I don't believe the decks are going to be ZA as long as they stay in line with the existing extended footprint. But when you start building an addition to a house that is taking up more height and things, Dan has been interpreting it to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And Mr. Eilerman and Mr. Evans have both contended that that's not clear in our code. They felt that their addition should have followed that same guideline, and Dan disagreed with that interpretation. Is that what you're asking about?
Correct. So,
Thank
and
you.
again, it circles back to, again, and I'll use, when I talk about economic development is anything that brings money and improves the value of a property and the tax base. So someone putting on an addition, hiring a local architect, going to Home Depot, buying the material, that's all. If we can make it and write it into the zoning ordinance that there's one less procedural hurdle they need, why not? And does it make sense? And again, part of the issue, when you brought similar with the home occupation, how many of these do we get per year? So if it's something like 4 or 6, I don't know, but if it's on a regular basis, and maybe we haven't got a lot lately.
I think setbacks are probably something that we have constantly because our lots are too small. So I have always taken the approach of exactly where you were heading. If somebody's going to build a $20,000 garage and it's really going to be nice, I try to say we should be trying to work with them. But I also want the neighbor to know he's going to be building 3 foot away from the property line, when in fact our code says 6. You see what I'm saying? So again, I think we can do some cleanup on this, but setbacks to me are probably one of they come to BZA a lot. And is it something that, could the building department take over a lot of those? I think so. Can they look at them and decide whether or not this is going to get up, the public that's what zoning protects. So when do you say it's not that important to your neighbor? You used the example, of a garage, and we have a lot of garages that have 0 setback. And then the weeds grow up and nobody can get to them, right? I mean, we have it all over Norwood. So,
Well, what I would like to do, if you guys are willing, is to, again, I could talk to Dan Bly, I will talk to the 2 architects we mentioned, and is there a way to tweak it further that we could resolve it and make it a little bit easier for these sort of things? And if you guys are willing, then I'll come back with some sort of appropriate wording.
I'm for that.
I'm comfortable with that.
I'd like to see that.
Jeannie?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. We're just making sure you're still there. We're checking
I'm
on
here.
you. Okay. All right. So that's 3 that we're sending you. Every meeting you go to is extra work, isn't it, Mike?
I'll chip away.
The 4th one, the 5th one, but the 4th that we're talking about now is this front flankage fences and BZA approval.
Can I have an opinion here? Since I've had to live with this
Well,
damn thing.
Can you?
forever.
Can you
I would,
or
I
do
would
you?
almost prefer you take it, because I have very strong opinions about this, which is probably not.
Okay. You first start off with saying, we have a situation in the city of Norwood that we should address first, which is the fact that every time somebody wants to do something who has a corner lot, they've got to deal with the language that they have 2 front yards. And shit, I think everybody has a dog nowadays. So all of a sudden, BZA has to be involved in every single fence for a backyard on a corner lot. So I think some really smart people could sit down and figure out how to handle that from what a corner lot. Because you talk about wanting to help the city of Norwood, young people are buying these lots in Norwood, and they're being told that, don't forget you got two front yards. No, I don't. I got 1 front yard that faces this floral. Well, no, you don't. You got one that, well, it's the concept, right? And that brings limitations. And then you got to go to BZA, $85, whatever, you could be rejected. So I guess my point of all that is you start there, but boy, I'd recommend strongly that we take front yard fences, what I call the front yard, out of our code completely. We shouldn't allow it. Why would we allow anybody to have a front yard fence? What do they need it for?
Now, to play devil's advocate, would that be also like a nice 4 foot tall picket fence?
Yes.
Okay. No, that's good. That's what I want to hear, or at least know.
I guess the minute you say a 2 foot or a 3 foot's okay, why not a 4.5 foot?
Mm-hmm.
I hated to be on this in making decisions. I wish I could always just say no. For that reason, because the next thing you've got dogs out in the front. And then you've got kids playing with their play gyms. Then you've got people putting play gyms up. Now, again, I'm not against kids. I had 5 of them. But, man, the front yard fence, the way it's written, actually allows it. But most of our homeowners don't want a front yard fence either. So it's not been, but occasionally we get somebody who wants, they don't have much of a backyard, so they want a place to run their dog. And I can just tell you that this one, to me, I think we've done a good job, I can tell you, of keeping control over this process. Carrie's, you've been with me almost 20 years. These don't pass very often. Usually it's an elderly couple who start crying. but it's terrible.
Yeah, well, to take your point further, do you and the rest of the commission would like to see, as you said, no front yard fences, period? And then that's a kind of a more resounding policy shift saying, hey,
Well, if the planning commission would, I'd like to, just because of this 20 years of experience of going through this, I'd like to give you a starting point and let you come back to the planning commission and say, I've read what Bernie wrote, and I think this should be modified, this recommendation. I think the minute you start saying, because you hit the nail on the head, what's wrong with the 4-foot architectural fence? I've heard that over the years. And
No doubt.
and what's architectural now? Well, Carrie's got a different opinion than Noah does, and Tom, we all have different opinions on what's architectural. Then all of a sudden, is a hedge a fence? We've got a write-up, but it starts to allow it, and you say, well, wait a minute, I didn't think we wanted them. And like I said, the only real difficulty that we have for almost 90% of the issues are corner lots. And for some reason, now that I know the term, the presidential district seems to have more of these than any other place.
Corner lots or requests for front yard fences?
Both.
Both.
Corner lots with classified front yard fences are almost on every agenda.
I've made my position pretty known very well to multiple people, and when the last fence went up in the front yard of a house and they started exercising their dogs in the morning, and you would walk past and those dogs would right to the sidewalk viciously yelling at you and barking and just making sure that you knew they were there at 6:30 in the morning. That's when I talked to pretty much everybody I could and said, I'm dead set against front yard fences. It's ridiculous that they were putting their dogs out there in their front yard like that so early in the morning. And I've made it clear my whole time. If I could, and I understand that there are many homes that are built right next to each other that have barely any front yard and have no backyard. I recognize that. But there's certain areas where I'm absolutely dead set against fencing in the front yard. We do need to define the corner lots. I would think that if you're coming back with something on this, it's defining those corner lots and giving, quite frankly, giving the BZA more definition and more help on understanding how to really.
And I think it'd be good because then people like Carrie, who they come in with a early application, she'd be able to show them, this is what you're up against. This is the code as it sits today. Because it's, in my opinion right now, it's a little gray. And you're always going to have the people who come even when it's black and white and say, well, what do you expect me to do? I need to have a place to run my dogs.
Yeah, and people do have dogs. Tom, how's your neighborhood with front yard fences and backyards and?
My street has very few front yard fences, but a block up the street, there's probably 10 of them.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole forest, floral, loaded with front fences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but no, down on my street and adjacent on Williams, we don't have any.
Can we get Carrie's opinion on it? Carrie, you're in a different section of town too.
There are not too many front yard fences in my area. What is there, you will see some of the leftover wrought iron fencing, and there is still, if there's anything, it's chain link, and that's from before 1985, because that's when this zoning code pretty much started. There are some houses, to overstep your question, the definition of front yard by the state of Ohio is between the front face of the house to the street. That's where our definition of a front yard comes from. So we actually have some houses that have 3 front yards in the city of Norwood that are on points. Your former commissioner, Sandra Kelly, on Board of Zoning Appeals, has been very good at, if we're going to approve a front yard fence, I would like to see it so far off of the sidewalk, for the very reason that Mayor Schneider mentioned. It wasn't until recently that I even saw Board of Zoning Appeals approve true front yard fences. And then last 10 years, they started doing it with more caveats like that, more conditions. But there's some clarity and some cleaning up that could be done that would make it easier. Right now, I have a handout that shows a grayed out area. You're not allowed to put a fence in this area in the city of Norwood without going to the Board of Zoning Appeals and requesting it. But
Well, again, I can specifically say, what you just defined as the front yard, if there's 5 of those in the last 15 years, I'd be surprised. That weren't based on a handicap situation or some situation like that.
that may be
All of the
true.
discussions come
I
on
may be
corner
wrong.
lots.
Yes, corner lots.
So, once we clear that up, I think that,
Yeah.
and once we clear up that architectural fences are not approved,
Mm-hmm.
because that's a great point, Mike, that's where the first place people are gonna go. This is a fence for architectural reasons. Okay,
Okay, I'm fine with bringing something back. I think we gave you some guidance on that, Mike, to bring something back to us and we can
Okay.
I think
discuss it again.
what we're asking for is some clarification on corner lots and what would classify as an architectural fence. Are those the two big items that we want to see there?
yep.
Okay.
I must bow out. I have another meeting to go to that I'm already a few minutes behind on, so. But thank you for all the work that you guys are doing and
No, appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor.
We banged out the greens.
I,
All right. I think that's a good amount of work for us to put on Mike for the next month. I think that gives him plenty to do. Mike, appreciate you preparing this for us today and for getting these things moving, the explanations.
No problem.
Would anybody else like to proceed on anything else, or are we all comfortable stopping there?
I think it's a good job, Mike. We couldn't have gotten this far without your starting point, so thank you.
Well, like I said, it's just, if this or other things, and I mentioned, with regards to that late recent one for the environmental types of things. So any additional things that are worthwhile, like now's the time, because it's, granted, there's other projects that are coming and going, depending, but, whenever I have some downtime, I can always allocate, more. And again, if it's something more serious, or it's going to take some time to debate, I'll say, interesting topic, let me spend some time and research it, and I'll get back to you. But like I said, right now, based on this list, the more time-consuming would be, let's say, the PUT changes, potentially, maybe access management, but everything else, like I said, we banged out 5 or discussed items, so.
All right. No further old business, so we'll move on to communications and miscellaneous, where we have no communications. Does anyone have anything for miscellaneous? Seeing none?
I have a question,
Yes.
knowing you might be able to answer it. If we know somebody in the city, and it's the only reason I'm bringing this up is because of home occupations. If somebody's running a home occupation out of their house, who is the enforcement agency in our city that I can actually file? Like, if they have a permit, fine. I mean, I know they don't have a permit, so that's.
That being a zoning code violation, I think you would want to take that to the building department.
Building department? Very good, thank
Terry,
you.
would you agree?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Because that is something that we always think about on BZA. How's it going to be enforced?
Right.
Sometimes proving it is difficult for Mark, depending on, that falls under zoning, and the zoning inspector sends out that letter of violation.
Very good.
Some of them are difficult, but we do the best we can.
All right. We have no absent members today, so we will pass that item on the agenda. And that brings us to adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Do I have a second?
Second.
Tom? Mrs. Town, please call the roll.
Chairman Powers,
Yes?
Mayor Steiner is left. Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
Time is 4:42. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.